In the spring of 1900, a group of Greek sponge divers took shelter from a storm near a small island called Antikythera. When the weather cleared, one of them went down to check the seabed and found a ship that had been sitting there for 2,000 years. They spent the next year pulling it apart. Bronze statues, glass, jewellery, coins, museum-quality stuff. And then, packed in with all of it, a lump of corroded bronze about the size of a shoebox, so calcified nobody could tell what it had once been. It sat in a drawer at the National Archaeological Museum in Athens for months. Nobody thought it mattered. They were wrong. It's the most important single object archaeology has ever pulled out of the sea. The lump cracked open on its own as it dried out, and inside was something that made no sense. Gears. Bronze gears. Dozens of them. Some no bigger than a coin, with teeth cut so fine you'd need a jeweler's loupe to count them. That was a problem. Because everything historians thought they knew said this shouldn't exist. Complex geared machinery, the kind of engineering that shows up in European clocks in the 1300s, wasn't supposed to exist in the ancient Mediterranean at all. And yet here it was, pulled from a ship that sank somewhere between 150 and 100 BCE, 1,000 years too early, by the old timeline. For decades, nobody really knew what to do with it. It got called the Antikythera mechanism, and mostly left alone, too corroded to open further without destroying it, too strange to confidently explain. A few researchers guessed it was some kind of astronomical instrument. Nobody could prove what it actually did. The breakthrough took until the 1970s, when a British historian of science named Derek de Solla Price got hold of X-ray images of the fragments. X-rays could see through 2,000 years of bronze corrosion in a way human eyes never could, and what they revealed was staggering. At least 30 interlocking gears, arranged with a level of precision that implied not just one clever craftsman, but an entire tradition of precision engineering that history had completely lost. It took another 30 years, and a purpose-built 3D X-ray CT scanner, built specifically for this one object in 2005, before researchers could finally read what was written on it. Because the mechanism wasn't just gears. It was covered, front and back, in tiny inscribed Greek text, almost like an instruction manual, cast in bronze. Here's what they found. On the front, a single dial showing the zodiac and the Egyptian 365-day calendar, with pointers that tracked the position of the sun and, most researchers believe, the moon and 5 visible planets, all moving at their own correct relative speeds, driven by one hand crank. On the back, 2 spiral dials. One tracks a 19-year lunar cycle, called the Metonic cycle, the pattern the Greeks used to keep a lunar calendar roughly in sync with the solar year. The other predicts eclipses, using a Babylonian cycle called the Saros, accurate enough to warn you which future date might see a solar or lunar eclipse years in advance. There's even a smaller dial tracking the 4-year cycle of the Pan-Hellenic Games, Olympia, Delphi, and others, so you'd know which games were coming up. Put simply, this is a mechanical model of the cosmos, as the Greeks understood it, that you could turn with your hand and ask, where will the moon be in 3 years? And get a real, geared, mechanically computed answer. It's not a metaphor to call it the first analog computer. That's genuinely what the mechanism is, and once you sit with that, the timeline gets uncomfortable. We know from the inscriptions and construction style it was built somewhere around 150 to 100 BCE, likely in the Greek world. Rhodes is the leading candidate, tied to the astronomer Hipparchus, and a known school of mechanical engineering there. But nothing else like it survives. No earlier prototypes. No later copies for 13 centuries until European astronomical clocks start appearing in the 1300s. It's a technology that appears once, fully formed, and then the knowledge just stops. That gap is one of the strangest things in the history of technology. Either this was a total one-off, a singular genius working alone whose work simply never spread. Or, and this is the theory more historians lean toward now, this wasn't actually rare at all. It was expensive and fragile and made of bronze, which gets melted down and reused constantly throughout history. We may simply be looking at the one that survived a shipwreck, out of what could have been hundreds, built by a tradition of Greek precision engineering that we've otherwise lost almost all physical evidence of. And that's not even the most contested part of the story right now. Because in April of 2025, a research team published something that reopened the entire debate. They argued the mechanism might never have actually worked at all. Their argument is about precision. When they measured the tooth spacing on the surviving gears, the manufacturing tolerances were inconsistent. Inconsistent enough, they argued, that in a real functioning gear train this dense, the gears would have jammed or skipped teeth. Their conclusion, this may have been more of a showpiece or a design exercise than a reliable working instrument. That's a serious claim, and it's not going unanswered. Other researchers point out the obvious problem. This object spent over 2,000 years on the sea floor, then more than a century drying, cracking and being handled by conservators. Corrosion doesn't shrink metal evenly, it warps it unevenly, gear by gear. Measuring 2,000-year-old corroded bronze and concluding the original workshop's craftsmanship was sloppy is, to a lot of researchers, measuring the scar and blaming the surgeon. Nobody's resolved it. Teams are still publishing new reconstruction attempts, trying to settle it physically, building faithful replicas to the measured tolerances and simply seeing if they turn smoothly. A study out just this year, in 2026, building functional physical reconstructions, concluded there are still at least 2 components missing from every model we've built so far, meaning even our best replicas might not be honest tests of the original design because we're still guessing at pieces of it. What we're left with is genuinely rare in archaeology. An object important enough to rewrite the timeline of engineering history, and still, more than 120 years after it was pulled out of the water, not fully understood. We know almost exactly what it was for. We still don't know, with certainty, whether it actually worked, or who exactly built it, or how many others like it once existed and are sitting in pieces on the floor of the Mediterranean, waiting. Sponge divers only found this one because a storm forced them to shelter near a random island none of them had planned to stop at. There's no reason to think that ship was unique. There's no reason to think that workshop only ever built one of these. Somewhere out there, the rest of the story is probably still buried. That's the Antikythera mechanism, the machine that shouldn't have existed for another 1,300 years and that we're still arguing about today. If you want to go down the next one of these with me, subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from.